Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so delighted today to be joined by the fantastic Paapa Essiedu to talk all about the Lazarus Project. And one of the things that really struck me right away with your character that you're playing, George, is he, ends up embroiled in very complex scenarios and situations. And he's not someone who takes information at face value. And he's also not a yes man. And he wants to discover answers and ask questions on his own volition. And I was interested in how that being such a part of the character then kind of translated over to the way that you were kind of analyzing and studying the text and looking at what are the things that other characters are telling me about the Lazarus Project? How is it being explained to me? How would my character interpret this and respond to this and dig deeper?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big reveal to him. Do you know what I mean? Like he's a very normal guy who's living in a who's living in an almost like heart-wrenchingly boring life. He's just like happy doing his job with his partner, etc. And then this whole different kind of dimension is revealed to him. And I think when that happens, it's the equivalent of someone telling you that gravity doesn't make things fall down, and makes things bounce up. It's like you have to question it. You can't take things at face value if you are to be sane. Um, and yeah, I think that's probably so. I think his newness to it and and the surprising nature of the revelation is what kind of chimes in with his character of being like someone who wants to do things on his own terms and wants like real motivation and real yeah, validation for the things that he does. So yeah, he's definitely someone who does who beats he travels with the beat of his own drum, as it were. But yeah, you can't just tell him what to do and he'll do it. He'll do things of his own volition.
And did you see a difference in terms of a lot of his confidence as a character from when he first kind of finds out everything about the Lazarus Project and comes on board? Because at the beginning, it feels like there's a little bit of an imposter syndrome for him because he is around people who have been primed for this. Like when we first see when Archie was recruited, it wasn't a surprise. She's like, "Am I being recruited for MI5 or MI6?" And of course, this is part of my trajectory. And for him, he comes from app developing, so that hasn't been part of his world in the past. But I feel like he really starts to understand what he brings to the table in terms of his confidence and his intelligence and his adeptness. And so did you kind of want to create a shift in terms of his confidence in that space throughout the series?
Yeah, I wanted to be like honest to the fact that he has gone from the tech world into, multinational like crime solving, like it's not a natural progression, and it's good for him to come up against the bumps that involves with one of which is you're going to be in a room with a lot of people that are seemingly more capable than you are. But he's a quick learner and he's a hard worker, and he does have like an innate quality that is required for the job that he does. Yeah, he's courageous and he's brave and he's a problem solver, and that does kind of like chime with the world of technology, like that kind of like non-binary way of thinking. Like he's able to crack codes that other people aren't able to crack and prove himself, and he's so desperate to prove himself, both to himself and to the people that he works with. He's so desperate to prove that he's worthy of the position that he's been put in, which I think eventually makes him a really, really valuable member of the team.
And with the fact that he has this discovery of, his life resetting and always going back to July 1st, there's kind of two different spaces in which that lives. And the first is he has no idea why this is happening, and nobody around him seems to be experiencing this or aware that they're experiencing this alongside him. And so there's kind of a real confusion and isolation to it because he doesn't have any answers, against once he's part of the Lazarus Project and he understands why it's happening. And so what were the different tools that you wanted him to use to try and navigate figuring everything out at the beginning when he doesn't know, against like the tools that he's using when he understands that this is cyclical?
I think the two speak to each other because, like, for the first half of the first episode, the guy's going, he's having a nervous breakdown. He's going crazy. Like nothing makes sense, and the person that he loves, the one kind of anchor in his life, the continuous stability in his life, even that doesn't connect to what he's going through, so that mentally and psychologically is a very difficult thing for him to deal with. And so I think he's so like relieved when someone comes with an explanation to him that kind of makes sense. It's extreme, but it kind of makes sense. Once that's offered to him, then I think that's what allows himself to throw himself into the job. He's so relieved that like the world does make sense. He's not a nutter. You know he's not a loner in this. He's not alone with it. He's got community. He's got other people who understand the feelings he's going through. I think that's what allows him to really commit to it.
And with that sense of community and the fact that he starts to kind of see some of the emotional fallout that people have experienced from going through this, and having the memories of it every single time and each of their different stories. How did you feel like that changed the landscape for him a lot? Because he kind of starts off being very much, there for the company, and then kind of going on his own personal adventure. And it feels like that's partly influenced by seeing what the people around him have been experiencing for even longer as well.
Yeah, I think that's what's special about the show. You see the show's got like various like genre influences, sci-fi, rom-com, thriller, action, whatever. But like, I think what's special about it is you actually really do follow the emotional journey of what it takes to be put in that position. It's not just like, wow, we can turn back time, so let's have a good time. It's like there are consequences and there are sacrifices. And I think that's what makes a lot of these characters incredibly noble. Like they've really given up huge things. They've given up loves of their lives in order to be good at the job that they do. But I think George, especially because he's new to it, he really questions, is that worth it? And are the Lazarus Project doing what it takes to care for their employees, to care for the people who are really putting their lives and their lives on the line, both in a literal sense in terms of the jeopardy and the danger, but also in terms of like being able to live a full life, and in terms of being able to have relationships, friendships, except families. These guys have sacrificed everything to do what they do. Is the transaction a fair one or not?
Absolutely. And with what you were saying there as well, in terms of just the mix of genre in the show, and you've got an action sequence one moment, and then a very sweet, intimate, romantic moment with his girlfriend, and then all of a sudden, really intense, dramatic moments. Do you find that creates certain challenges in trying to kind of balance all those genre elements and tones, or do you actually find that it makes the job easier because life doesn't exist in a silo of one specific genre or tone, and so it's more naturalistic to the way that we move in the world as people?
Yeah, you're spot on there. Like for me, it's always been in the pursuit of truth, and like with like I'm not even saying that genre is a restricting kind of parameter upon work, but I don't think you ever want to be thinking about how can we keep it in this one kind of tonal space. And yeah, the way Joe Barton, our writer, is one of our best ones. The way he writes is with complete freedom, imaginatively and creatively, in order to allow things to turn on a dime. So that's what's so satisfactory about that, being able to have like an incredibly like high octane, like thrilling kind of car chase scene, and that gets quickly undercut by like a really like sharp, dry, witty line, which then moves seamlessly into like a romantic scene, which moves back into like a philosophical question about what the greater good versus the individual progression. So like it's a show that's incredibly ambitious in terms of the things that it wants to combat and take on. And yeah, I think as an actor, it's a good challenge to be given like a bit of a blank canvas to paint upon.
And with the fact that, as you just said, it's really centered around this philosophical question about personal good or greater good, that also creates a really rich playground in terms of moral compass for the character, because the things that he does in pursuit of trying to bring back the person that he loves, but at certain points are things that he wouldn't have done at the beginning of the series or before he knew and learned and experienced certain things. And so what was the space that gave you to play within, with the fact that it's not always a rigid format for the character of this is where my line is, because it's always moving and it's always changing depending on the circumstances?
Well, I mean, number one, time travel or time not existing in a linear format does like draw questions of like, what are consequences then? Do you know what I mean? If you are able to reset back to a certain point, does what you did in the interim actually count. I don't know, but like I think with the characters, it's them. They are the bearers of the scars, and they are the bearers of the memories. And so so if he has to like commit some sort of atrocity, that will always be alive in his mind's eye, whether or not it's reflected in other people's experiences. You know, so I kind of think the other thing is we're shown the lengths at which he's willing to go to protect or, you know, yeah, reclaim his idea of love, at least. I think that just is rather testament to how deeply he feels love. You know, it's like you only do that when you feel like you don't have any other option. You know, he's at the limit of his experience, or at the limit of what he can tolerate in terms of his loss. And I think that's a very powerful motivational factor. You know, like like you hear these stories about mothers lifting up cars in order to save their children. Like within us as human beings, we have huge untapped capacity, and are kind of just waiting for the scenario or the situation for that capacity to be released. And I guess in this show, we're really seeing that happen over 8 episodes for George.
It's literally one of those like find yourself someone who loves the way that George loves Sarah in the show. And it's such a great point as well that you bring up in terms of every time he goes through this time loop, the experience of anything that he's done or seen or experienced lives within him, even if it's technically erased through time. And I feel like we really see such an evolution in your performance in regards to that. And there's a totally different emotional fabric that exists in the character as episodes progress, and kind of a more quietness and stillness in him a lot of times, because there's just so much that he's been through. And so how did that change the landscape of the character for you as you went through filming the season?
Yeah, I think as people will find as the season goes on, like the challenges are greater, and the the risks are greater, and the you know the lengths that he goes to are greater, you know, like almost unthinkably so. And so for that to all happen in one body, also bear in mind, especially in the kind of middle sections of the show, all of this is happening over the course of like a couple of days. You know, it's not happening over a long period of time, it's over a couple of days. So he's bearing a huge amount of pressure on his shoulders, and he's still just a human being. And like we said earlier on, he's not someone who's trained by the FBI or CIA or MI6 or whatever. He's a normal person who's not used to this level of pressure being put upon him. So yeah, that I always find like moments with a character where you can find stillness and you can find quietness, really almost like more communicative than the moments where they're, you know, raging against the machine or whatever. Like you can say so much in those moments of stillness, to give an insight or a little window into what a character's going through, has been going through, and fears going through in the future.
And even just as an acting exercise, re-existing the same scene over and over and over again, but playing so many different emotional trajectories and narrative trajectories of that same exact moment, is so fascinating to think about. But I was actually curious if there were elements from, because you've worked in theater so much, where you're like in rehearsals and you're really just sitting there workshopping a specific scene throughout a day, if there were elements of that really transferred over into the idea of we're taking a scene and we're playing it in every single possible direction.
Yeah, I guess like the thing about plays is like everyone feels like whenever you're doing a play, people are like, oh, that must be so boring doing the same thing again and again and again, over and over again. But it's never the same. You know, you've always got a different audience. You always are coming to, you know, the theatre with a different kind of context, frame of mind, physical well-being, you know, and that will always hopefully inform the performance or the show in order to make it completely different. And that is what George is going through, even though like he repeatedly finds himself waking up in the same bed or in the same room or whatever. It's always like informed by what he's gone through before that reset point, and that information is crucial. You know, otherwise it would just become it would be like one of those like tapes that are caught on repeat. you know, and nobody would want to watch that. I think nobody would want to watch that. So yeah, it's about like finding the nuance, which might seem small in the performance, but it's actually hopefully really big on the inside.
And did you think it was important for him as a character to have a lot of consciousness of his actions, where even though the people around him won't remember, he never knows if this is going to be the last time that it resets, because he's not in charge and he's not the one making the calls. So as much as he assumes that he'll keep resetting back to the same point, he never knows when it will be the last time loop that he's living in.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's almost like a worse position to be in than what we're in right now. At least like right now we know what the rules are. Like time continues marching forward no matter what you do, and you can't take it back. You can't go back and correct your mistakes. You can't like tell that ex-partner that you didn't really mean it when you said that thing or whatever. What's done is done. Whereas like with him or with them, what's done is done, or is it not done? And then when it's not done, it kind of like feels like you're being like pulled out of water when you're drowned. It's very sudden, and kind of painful. So yeah, there's no sense of like absolute security in the world that he lives in. And yes, it's thrilling and fascinating, and I guess like it gives you a sense of real ability. I guess you feel that you can really like affect the way the world turns, but like there's no stability that comes with that. And without stability, what happens to our states of mind, our emotional states?
I also wanted to ask about finding some of the comedic space within the show as well, because as much as it deals with certain philosophical conversations and darker moments of the character, there is also a lightness and a levity at certain moments, whether it's kind of the undercurrent of it being quite amusing to watch what is it like for him to be a fish out of water thrown into a car chase in the middle of a gunfight for the first time, and how he responds to that, but also just the lightness that exists in terms of his relationship when things are in a really wonderful space between them, and that being such an important aspect. And so I was interested in kind of how the writing really helped you to find a lot of that.
Yeah, like I'm always interested in the light and shade of characters, and I'm always very turned off by any character that kind of has a kind of monolithic, kind of unchanging sense of self, and I feel I like we all have experience in those darkest moments, in those challenging moments. Often we also have our like most humorous moments, and the things that we learn most about our lives. So I think George is really funny, he's really smart, he's really charming. That's why the people that are around him are so fond of him. So I think the show, like I said, like exists in so many different genres. That was one of the genres that I particularly enjoyed like playing around in.
And this is also your first role that's kind of asked so much of you in terms of a lot of the action sequences and the stunt choreography that you went through. And so I was just interested in the experience of going through training for a lot of that, and then working alongside the stunt team once you were in production, and thinking very specifically about his evolution as well of, what does it look like the first time he's in a situation like this, and the first time he's holding a gun and pointing it at someone, versus kind of when he's been in more situations like that and lived through certain time loops with more of it throughout the show.
Yeah, so what how did I respond to that as an actor?
Yeah, and just like what was the experience of kind of going through those different layers of it?
Yeah, it was great. It was great in the most part, like a lot of those stunts are real stunts, and real stunts are like really scary. There was this one scene where I had to kind of drop out of like a third floor window or something like that, um and obviously we're very blessed to have stunt coordinators and stunt people that kind of like double for us for the most dangerous things. But like there was still a moment where like I was hanging out of a third floor window in a harness, because you need to get the shot that allows you to kind of like cut between that. So Yeah, like I think it's thrilling, and I really respect people who are like, yeah, I do all my own stunts. But I'm also like, the real respect goes to the stunt people, you know, because they're the people who are genuinely like getting punched in the face, or genuinely like getting knocked over by cars, and really putting their bodies on the line like that.
And in terms of making the show as well, because you've already filmed the second season of it and gone in through production of that. As an actor, I imagine that every single time you show up on a new job, there's a lot of uncertainties that come with that first day of stepping into a new character, stepping into working with a whole new team of people. And so what was that experience going back into season 2, just having built such a relationship with your character at that point and kind of knowing a lot of the ins and outs of it, as well as, you know, having worked with a lot of the same team already?
It was great, you know, like there's one thing where, you know, you do a first series of a show, and you're just so delighted that someone's offered you a job, or someone's like trusted you to be able to embody like their creative idea. But then you go through the process of, you know, like doing press for it, and then it gets released and people watch it and they decide if they like it or not, and then a broadcaster decides if they want more of it, you know. So we were already in like such a great position, the fact that like it had all gone so well. It was like, yeah, it was really thrilling to be given another opportunity to deepen those characters and those journeys. And Joe, yeah, like I said, like his imagination knows no limit. So in the second series, he's like taking everything and then run with it even further, you know. And yeah, I'm really like, it's obviously like kind of odd, like for us, like having the show come out a year later in the US to the UK, but I'm so excited for people to watch it in the US and then to enjoy it again when the second series comes out.
Absolutely. I mean, the first season has just built so much, and you've done so much in terms of everything that you've brought into this character. So congratulations on a fantastic first season. Can't wait to see the second. Really appreciate it,
Oh,
Paapa.
thank you.